So that's another thing. There are some people who will change their answers from wrong to right, and you can actually see it on the Scantron, or from right to wrong, I should say. And that there are people who do that. Most people, when they change their answers, usually change their answers because they read something a little later on and it triggers a memory, and so they're changing their answers from wrong to right. That's the most common thing. But there are a few individuals who start second guessing. And if you're one of and you need to know. So are you a second guesser? You'll see that in your pattern, that you had the right answer and then you changed it. If you are one of these people, you need to start having a little talk with yourself. Why are you doing that? Under what conditions? There are two conditions that really lead to that changing up. One person is a person who's not confident. So this is, again, a little bit of a study issue, but you want to make sure, if you're not, to go with the first instinct and only change it if you're absolutely sure you're changing it from wrong to right. So you have to earn that. The other reason why people will change their answers from right to wrong is when they are overthinking the problem. This happens a lot with really good students, and it's kind of like they're so nervous that they will read and they'll say, I can make this option correct if under these conditions, and they're adding things that are actually not in the question or in the answer. Now, the best way to get around this is to actually read the question, cover up the options, and spew out the answer. So if you were doing the aspirin, it's like, Bob is a 40-year-old male with a cluster headache. It's like, oh, cluster headaches do this. I know the answer is now ibuprofen. This is because, ibuprofen works better with men. And then look to see if ibuprofen is one of the answers. That is a very good technique, and if you've studied with the spew method, you should be able to do that with virtually with each question. So the problem, or one of the issues is, when I deal with students who think that who got, let's say, 60%, the mix, is this a study problem, you don't know the answer today, or is this you got screwed up during the test? You know that, it's in your head, but you didn't get it out. And what I see is, in most students, it's at least 50-50. With upper year students or students who are generally highly studied and motivated, it's even higher. So it's not a study problem. So you're beating yourself up. I got 60%, I need to study harder, and then you start crying because it's like, I don't think I could study harder. I've rewritten my notes 8 times. So they get really upset. I spent 36 hours studying for this one test. I can't do that. Oftentimes those are people who are making mistakes that have nothing to do with memory. So the post-mortem, every test you do, every assignment, you should be saying, why did I lose my marks? Is this something that, looking at it today, I would have done it differently, I would have made a different choice? Or is this something I need to learn, that I missed this somehow in my study technique? So that's the number one thing. Now, we've gone through the myths about the tests, we've gone through the study technique, and I've talked about the post-mortem a little bit. I don't know how anybody gets to be a better student without going through the post-mortem. It changed me from being a pathetic failing student in high school to being actually a fairly good student and actually made it through to graduate school. That was the major change. So every test is a chance to do an assessment of what worked for you, and if something's not working, dump it. If rewriting your notes is only getting you to 70% and you're putting in a lot of effort, that's a sign you need to change up what you're doing. You need to think about it in a different way. Any questions on those things? Okay, the other big problem I see with my intro students, in particular, who have to write a big midterm, or a lot of multiple choice, is how they approach the test. So they get into the test, and maybe you've done this. How many of you have frozen? Like, you start out and you're like, oh, and you read question 1, and then you're like, I don't know the answer. So you sit there and you're trying to think of the answer, and it's like time is ticking, and you start to freak out, and it's like, oh, and it takes you 15 minutes to answer question 1, and then you start thinking, there's 100 questions, and I've only got 2 hours. Oh my God, what am I going to... So you've done that. I've done it too. One of the things I realized is that when you go in, this is like doing Sudoku or crossword puzzles. Do you guys know what Sudoku and crossword puzzles? So when you do a crossword puzzle, what's the first thing you do if you're being strategic? Let's say you read one across, you don't know the answer. What do you do then?
The answer to the questions.
You skip it to something that you know.
Exactly. What you should be doing with your test is treating it like that. Everything in your memory is interconnected. It's particularly for a subject, right? So what happens is if you can't get to a piece of information, that's fine. You might be able to fill it in or get that information after you've already gotten clues from other things. So what I do is if I read question 1 and I don't know the answer immediately, so I do my little spew thing and I say, oh, Freud was famous for his theory in, and if I don't know the answer, I put a question mark in the margin and I just move it on to 2. I go through the whole exam very quickly and skim it and only answer the questions that I look at and I say, oh, this is dead easy. Oh, this is my favorite part. Oh, I remember that. And I get all the easy questions. I put them into the Scantron right away, so record those and get them out of the way. These are your easy questions. Now what usually happens is you've got a few done, and then you read something later on that reminds you of the answer to the first question. And so what I do is another skim, and this one I go through the question marks. Now again, I actually do 3 passes. The second time through, if I don't know the answer, I put a double question mark, and then I move on. And so what I'm constantly doing is getting the easy marks, because there could be lots. If you get hung up on the first part of the exam, what if there were easy peasy ones later on that would have been so easy? And you have 20 marks that would have been a gift. And from 80 to 100, you would have been perfect, but you never got there because you got so hung up answering all the first set of questions. So go through and get the easy marks. With questions that are really screwing me up, like those ones that are worded in a clunky way, or that I really don't know the answer, and I'm going, oh shoot, I didn't study this. I put a big star, and what I do is I wait till the end of the exam. If you studied well, you shouldn't have a lot of stars, but sometimes you do. But then what I do is I try to be rational. Yes?
So how do you do this, keeping in mind that there is always a time factor? Should time be in your mind as you're going through your passes? Because I think that's brilliant. But I know students, I'll suggest
No.
that to students and they'll say, but then I'll run out of time.
No, because what you're doing is you're skimming. You're not, if it takes you any time to suss through, if it doesn't pop into your head that one of these is the obvious answer, don't continue thinking it through.
Thank you.
We're looking for like that crossword puzzles where you read it and it's so obvious what the answer is, that there's no question in your mind. So this is a very fast, it should be a fast pass. Where you're going to run into trouble is if you're not good at reading quickly. That will get better in time because unfortunately or fortunately in university, reading and being able to read quickly is going to be a key skill in every course. You've got a lot of readings. So we want you to not waste time. Don't think about time because what you're doing is you're answering things that are more definite rather than struggling through questions that you're going to maybe have to guess on. The stars, oftentimes I try to do strategic guessing. Get rid of the options you know it's definitely not. Try to get down, eliminate, I know it's not this, but, and then use your intuition, your intellect to see if you can sort of ferret out the answer. What would be the best answer? In many cases, you might be able to get this down to a 50-50 choice, but even then, unless there's a penalty for guessing, always answer. Now, I hear you, and really this takes some practice to do. If you read my spew, one of the things that I do with many of my spews is I make sure there's a time limit. Study the way you have to perform. If you know that you have a very, very strict time limit and your prof is going to be one of those who is very, very challenging with their exams and only gives you barely enough time, then you need to be prepared that you want to have a lot of things that come to your mind quickly. This is where studying appropriately is important. You don't want a lot of question marks. as you go through. You want a lot of things that are at your fingertips. And that's why my spew was so comforting for me. It's kind of like, if I can spew it, I probably know it well enough to find the answer in a short answer. So that's one of the key skills. I would say that for the first pass, it should take about half your time. And then in your second passes, because you're dealing with smaller subsets, it's less. And then the stars where you're guessing, you're going to have to let them go. But they're the ones that you probably aren't going to get anyways. They're the least likely for you to get wrong. And then when so try to be as strategic as possible. It's like a game, and that's the other thing that changed for me. I changed from thinking about assessments as, oh God, I'm going to be assessed, to, can I up my score this time? Can I get more? So I was always, it sounds awful, but it's not as negative as it sounds. I would say, okay, I got 70. That means I missed 30% of what the prof wanted me to know. What went wrong? Was it my study method? Was it the way in which I looked at the answers? And then what I would do is play a little game. Okay, I know these